All right. All right, then I will call this regular meeting of the Monte Sereno Better Streets Commission to order at 7:11 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can I please get a roll call?
Commissioner Azim?
Here.
Here.
Commissioner
Levine. It's okay. Here. Still here.
Actually, Vice Chair.
I think so.
Yeah, you are. Commissioner Waller.
Here.
Don't meet all but enough.
Here.
And Chair Bell.
Yeah. Thank you. Next item, are there any changes to the orders of the day?
Yeah, there are no changes.
All right. Next, we will move on to oral communications, where anyone from the public, if you'd like to speak on any items that aren't on the agenda, you can do so now. No one? All righty. Being none, we will move on to the next item. Are there any written communications?
No, the only thing we have is there was an addition to the fire department tonight. They just adopted some guidelines related to one of our items, and so I'm so sorry about that. It just started at the last council meeting. So I did provide each of you with a copy of the guidelines from the fire department just tonight.
Great, thank you. All right, next we will move on to unfinished business, approving the minutes from our October 11th meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve these minutes?
And we did receive one correction, which we will put into the record.
Great.
Sorry to find that
No, I appreciate it.
stray E that was gone.
It was.
Okay, yeah. Anyone like to second? Motion to second? All right.
Who was the first? I'm sorry. All right.
Christine.
And who was the second? Perfect. All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, unanimous approval. Next, we will move on to new business, which the first item of new business we have is traffic calming measures and a presentation by Santa Clara County Fire Department regarding traffic calming measures.
So I'll just quickly introduce this. We have representatives tonight from both the Santa Clara County Fire Department and the Los Gatos Monte Sereno Police Department, which of course are the agencies charged with providing law enforcement and fire protection services to the city. A request had been made some time ago as a possible topic to have a conversation, receive some information and have a conversation with the fire department. And so they are here tonight to make a brief presentation, present some materials which they've just adopted today, I believe you said, regarding traffic calming. And also, as part of the discussion tonight, I thought it would be really useful for us to have some data on traffic speeds in and around the Daves Avenue School. So to that end, I've been working with I'm sorry, Kalipo, I cannot remember your last name. Sergeant Calviloa with the police department to deploy the devices for a week, I believe it was. They just ended a few days ago to get some data on speeds, because I think it's really important for all of us to see actual data, so that we can, make our decisions and recommendations grounded in more substance. So we're going to present that. This is really just an open, sort of informational, ask questions, dialogue kind of event. Excuse me, because we don't have a specific location tonight to talk about. So with that, I think we will start with the folks from the fire department.
Evening, Commissioners, City Manager, City Engineer. My name is Curtis Ruel, R-U-E-L. I'm a Senior Deputy Fire Marshal with Santa Clara County Fire. I was asked here to come here this evening to talk a little bit about traffic calming measures and specifically sort of speed bumps and speed tables. In front of you, you have a recently approved standard regarding these particular installations. I want to lightly go through the standard, and then I'll be available for any questions or concerns that you might have. I've also have a representative from our Operations Division. Battalion Chief Shoemate is also here to answer more operationally driven questions, and I can answer more like plan check engineering type questions for you. So the standard defines speed hump and speed table. The primary difference being that a speed hump is an arc, where a speed table will add approximately a 10-foot flat section in the middle between the ends of the arc. Typically, speed tables are installed at crosswalks, so it allows a flat surface for the crosswalk to exist, whereas speed humps are generally put in the middle of the street or along the street pathway. We are looking for approval prior to any installation, and we're also, of course, looking for your own city or town approval prior to any installation. So it would be a partnership in terms of not just putting them in on private roads, but also on public roads. We are looking to have speed tables not installed along primary emergency response routes as determined by our department. I don't have a formal map or determination. My understanding at this time is that Days Avenue is considered a primary emergency response route between different parts of our districts. And so we do go through there quite a bit to get to calls to avoid some of the more congested areas of, I guess it would be Santa Cruz, Winchester, and the Highway 9 corridor. We get into a little bit of the standards in terms of going to item 2B. We talk about speed limit maximums where we don't want anything more than 30 miles an hour. We're looking for separation between multiple speed tables or speed humps. Any other traffic items on item 2D that are different than this particular standard, we're looking for specific approval or submittal so we can address things like widths or heights or turning radiuses. If you come into the third item on the standard, it gets a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of approach signage, striping, asphalt thickness, angles of approach, angles of departure, etc. I think if you had questions specifically about that type of construction, I would refer those to your town engineer. But this is a standard that we have currently put into practice. And then the last page gets a little bit more into the construction and tapering and meeting of curb base and gutter, a little bit into some of the striping requirements and wording, etc., edge grinding, type of material, aggregate size, etc. I don't think I need to bore you with all those little details, but sometimes that's helpful to city or town staff. I'm sure you have lots of questions, and I will attempt to address them as much as I can. Let me give you some time to digest the standard a little bit, and then I'll be happy to answer any of your questions or any of your concerns.
Could you talk a little bit about, a little bit of background. I've lived on Poppy Lane for 21 years, and I've watched the sidewalk go in, and I watch the traffic every day. I'm anxious to see the data, but I've got my own nonsense. Could you give an idea? There's all sorts of rumors in the neighborhood. I've been in the neighborhood for a while, and I've been in a lot of different flamingo parties, and generally you'd bring up, oh yeah, we'd like to put in speed humps, but oh, the fire department won't let us put them in. Just a little bit of background. That's kind of the general consensus, and I had no idea. That's why I pushed for it. I had no idea what's real, what's not real. Obviously, kid safety is really important. Without getting into the details too much, which roads are really, were we talking about? I noticed in the standards they were talking about 2 access ways. I'm not sure if that means entrances or roads. Are we talking about Bruce? Are we talking about Poppy? I know Dave's obviously is affected. What roads are really considered part of that environment for protection?
I assume, Commissioner, you're talking about item 2A, the primary emergency response routes is probably what you're referring to?
Yeah, which ones would you be paying close attention to where, gee, we got to be real careful, I guess is what I'm asking.
Major thoroughfares, I can't give you a specific map or a list of roads. I can't point to that at this time. It's something I am going to have to follow up on to find out if we do have an adopted list of specific streets. But at this time, I think my understanding is that this is based on just essentially what are major arterial streets that our responding units tend to use to get to calls. Days Avenue is certainly one of them.
Yeah.
I can't comment on Bruce or Poppy. I don't know if that's something. No.
So it's something we could look into, basically.
Yeah, I think and I would speak very broadly in this particular context, I think that if you're getting into smaller residential streets where you're losing divider lines, you're losing medians, right? You're just going to essentially just a straight patch of asphalt, single-family housing on both sides. That's probably not going to be a primary emergency response route. Versus something like Days, you have a center line,
Right.
you have bike lanes, shoulders, you have some industry, some commercial. And granted, it's not a lot, but there is some. That would be a different situation.
Could you also give me an idea of what, I've seen these big, for lack of a better word, these big macho trucks with these big suspension systems and big wheels. And I looked in the back and you had, a quarter-inch makes no difference to me, but I was looking at it, I was smiling. The one recommended by the fire department, if I was reading the dimensions, was 1/4 inch smaller, was like 2 3/4 inches high versus 3 inches high. I guess my real question is,
Yep.
does a 1/4 inch really, I don't care personally one way or the other, but does a 1/4 inch really make a difference to that truck?
I can't speak about people's personal vehicles. I'll speak in terms of our rigs. We are comfortable. I think you may be referring to the older document
Yes, yeah.
that you initially got, and I think that was calling for a 2 3/4 inch rise
And
from
the
the base.
3 was not recommended, and I said,
And-
boy, for a 1/4 inch with that truck, it's kind of like, I don't really care, but it's kind of
Right.
like, are they really that sensitive, or is that engineering gone wild?
I would certainly, in terms of how the speed and it reacts to cars, I might refer to your engineer on it, but from our perspective, we're comfortable, as stated here in the standard, with the 3-inch berming, and we're also comfortable with the table with still a 3-inch berm, but just, it's a straight line extended and then ramped on the edges. So we're comfortable with
Okay.
either one. Whether it makes a difference for people with their jacked up trucks, I really couldn't comment
No, I was
on.
really worried about you. I'm not caring about them.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
From our perspective, it is always going to slow us down a little. That's the point. We are going to have to slow down to negotiate either one. How much we slow down, it's going to really depend on, just the particular engineer that's driving, the nature of the call. And when we're talking, seconds and minutes of difference to certain life-saving calls, I mean, our average EMS response time is around 7.5 minutes. So if, let's say, now you had to traverse, let's just pick a number, let's say 2 speed humps or 2 speed tables, and you had to drop your speed and maybe you slowed down by 5 to 10 seconds per one, now you've added 10 to 20 more seconds. I'm not speaking overly scientifically, I'm speaking broadly. So if you're at 7.5 minutes and now you're pushing up to adding 10 to 15 more seconds, you're adding a fair amount, percentage-wise, to an overall call. So that's why we don't support them on the main drags and the primary routes. In residential streets, that's probably a little bit different because we're not going to be going down those streets all the time, right? It's a lower call frequency, a lower traffic volume.
Do you look at cost benefit at all? Because you mentioned you slow it down. Obviously, you want to get to the person faster.
Yes, sir.
But if you saved one more life by keeping the Maserati from going faster, do you do that trade-off, or it's just we're going to get there slower, and we don't care if it slows cars down, which would cause more accidents, which would cause us to go. It's a vicious circle when you think about it.
No, and I see where you're going. I don't. I certainly wouldn't say that by not putting something in, if we're not saving one life, that's not important. Certainly, slowing traffic down and being cognizant of bicycles and pedestrians is crucial. How that's balanced or weighed is really, unfortunately, sort of a political decision that the city and your commission will have to weigh.
Okay.
We can respond and get over these. That's why we've approved the standard. We can drive over and we'll get there. The real question is, how much time does it add? I can't give you a specific scientific number. I would estimate 5 to 10 seconds per obstacle as an approximation. How many of those are in every call? Don't know. Versus the life you might save because a car is slowing down, I don't have any data on that. So that's something, unfortunately, you folks are probably going to be saddled with making a decision on.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Question: I don't know. Has the same fire department installed these in Los Gatos in residential areas and seen kind of what they've done or the feedback from them?
I haven't I'm sorry.
I just said it's a good question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I haven't had any specific feedback one way or the other. This is almost completely a mirror image of the town of Los Gatos' construction standard in terms of the height and the attachment to curb, etc. So this is already in Los Gatos. We serve Los Gatos. I haven't had any negative feedback one way or the other. I don't think we have any specific increase in response time.
No, I can tell you that Mark Shumate, Battalion Chief assigned here in Los Gatos. I can tell you that these were installed in both Cupertino and Los Altos on a couple of streets, and it absolutely did affect our response time. One in Cupertino was on the same street as the firehouse. Now, we talked about Dave's Avenue and other smaller residential streets and the differences there. Well, the difference is we're on Dave's Avenue all the time, because when our truck comes from Winchester Station at Larkin Winchester over into Monte Sereno, they're taking Dave's Avenue, because otherwise it's a long shot to go down to down Winchester, make the right on Highway 9. So we're using that to save time. Now, we're not flying over Dave's Avenue. We're cognizant that there is a school there and there's children and it's a residential neighborhood, and we're careful in our responses. But when we've got to slow down for the speed bumps and get up and over that, imagine you're driving your 80,000-pound toolbox down the road, how much impact that has on the road or on the apparatus. So our drivers are very careful with a fire truck that costs in excess of $1 million. Our mechanics aren't very happy when we damage those apparatus. So in addition to the cost to the taxpayer. So we're very careful about our responses, but like Curtis said, we're in a game where seconds count. And imagine, someone who's having trouble breathing, someone who's having a heart problem. Hold your breath for 30 seconds and imagine that extra 30 seconds that we would have in the response times to certain areas given the speed bumps. As you can probably tell, I'm not a big fan of the speed bumps. I'm all about getting to where we need to be to help the people, because the more we're delayed, the less a person with a medical problem has of survival when they're in critical condition. So I'm all about getting there in a timely manner and doing our best to help them out.
Question. In servicing northern Monte Sereno, do you use Eaton or Vineland or both? Do you consider those primary response routes?
I can't comment on what would be primary response. So I looked at a couple other cities' primary response, and they have those spelled out. This is a brand new policy for us.
Okay.
That's something that will come, but we'll have to work with the police department as far as primary response routes and what we would consider primary response routes, because obviously we serve Campbell as well. We don't have anything that looks like Hamilton Avenue in Monte Sereno. So it's all about perspective, right? There's going to be major response routes here, or emergency response routes here, that aren't even going to be close to what the emergency response routes in Campbell look like. So that all has to be kind of hashed out as far as what we would consider a primary emergency response route over something that wouldn't be considered a primary emergency response route. But like Curtis mentioned, on the average residential street, imagine your street at home. How many times do you see a fire truck on a call on your street? I can tell you on my court, I've been there 25 years, probably twice, 3 times maybe, that somebody's had to call 911 from my court that has 13 houses on it. So the smaller streets aren't getting the traffic from the emergency response vehicles, but something like Dave's, which would obviously be a primary route, would definitely have an impact on our responses.
How would you recommend intuitively? I studied a little bit of regulatory economics in graduate school, and there's cost benefit to everything. And I know you'd probably be happy having a, Indianapolis 500 street. I'm exaggerating to make a point, but obviously the 200,000, I have 200 to 300,000 Maseratis go by, they're Lamborghinis actually, go by my house in the morning, okay? And it's really hard driving those cars slow. The police department does as good a job. They're there for a while. Everything slows down and speeds up. But there's a balance between protecting the neighborhood and obviously you getting there on time. And you get really analytic and you could say, gee, present value of a kid's probably worth $10 million and your truck's worth $1 million. The economists love doing that stuff. But how intuitively would you make that trade-off? Because on one side you got total access, and the other side you got wide open streets, the 200, the BMWs and the Maseratis go down. How would you balance the two? From your perspective.
That's the beauty from my side of doing my job is I'm not a politician.
It's economic, it's
And
not really
there-
politics.
Well, it is politics, though, in my opinion.
Okay.
Only because, and economics also obviously has a big part in it, but there is a dollar figure there, and there is a formula there for figuring all that out. And there's got to be a line drawn somewhere, right?
Sure.
So it's not my job to draw that line. It's my job to get us there safe and provide our service to the communities that pay us to be there and protect them. At some point in the political process, those formulas need to be looked at, and those dollar amounts and everything that you would look at your level or above are going to have to be considered. I can't consider those.
Okay.
My job is, if there's a life that we can save or impact, we're going to be there and do it. And the faster we get there, the more of a chance we have to impact those lives. I know that's not really.
No, I was just looking for
answering your question,
intuition,
but
but
that's
it's
the best
a
I've
hard question, by the
got.
way.
Oh, totally.
And,
Yes,
and perhaps,
yes.
Commissioner, maybe that can be blended somewhat with some of the statistics in terms of actual speeds that are occurring in your neighborhood, and also mixing in with accident data. If you're having a lot of accidents or a lot of casualties or a lot of events, or if you're having high rates of speed that are being recorded, that might warrant then moving the line. Versus, I don't have a lot of speeding. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the data. You live there. I don't.
Okay.
You don't have a lot of speeds. You don't have a lot of calls for service. We're not issuing a lot of traffic citations. Whatever the data might be, those data points, then that might move the line somewhere else. Again, I'm not on the commission. Just my thoughts.
A comment to fill those, you're kind of assuming that it's either speed humps or nothing for traffic calming, but there may very well be traffic calming measures that could be put in place that would not have the same
Oh,
impact
sure,
on
I'm
these
open.
guys.
I'm not an engineer. I just want to know what our limitations are, so, the good engineers can look at that.
We are open to receiving any proposal for any additional traffic calming measures. That, of course, would have to come out of, it's public streets, so it would start probably in this office, then come to us for plan review in terms of technical turning radiuses, et cetera, heights, clearances, widths.
Could I also ask, it's, obviously, we want to be supportive of the police and the fire department, because you guys are critical, but legally, do you have the right to just reject it, or is it just a recommendation? I just was curious.
No, I'm not a lawyer, Commissioner. I think.
No, but
I think my quick take is, as a city that's part of our district, that we would have the fire code authority, and which would fall into the fire code for access, and streets are part of access. So if you were to magically one day just close a street, that would be in conflict with our ability to access properties. So I think, again, not being a lawyer, I think we have some legal standing in terms of at least having an approval process for this traffic calming. If we were to say no and it was something the city really wanted, that's going to be above my pay grade.
It's above mine, too. I just didn't know who took precedent. And we don't have to do that, by the way. I don't want to, but I was just...
Perfectly valid question.
Great. Any other questions for the fine folks in the fire department?
No.
All right. So then, so I'll pull up the slide for the data from the police department survey, and then have them
Thank you
speak,
both.
have them speak to
Thank you.
that.
No problem. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Terry, can I just ask you, how do we find out what streets are really affected? Because, I mean, that's critical, isn't it? I mean, other than Dave's?
I'm sorry, what's your question?
Hey, it sounds like Dave's is a street that's affected, but I want to know, I'd like to know, I think we should know technically, are we talking Poppy, Bruce,
In terms
and
of-
Dave's as far as the
Primary
control
response
goes? I mean,
routes.
I think it's just Dave's, but I don't know.
But isn't that determined by the fire department? What's the primary access?
My understanding is that is determined by us in some fashion. I don't have specific data or
If,
maps
if,
for you.
if, it's sometime in the not-too-distant future, if you could provide that to us, that'd be awesome, and then I could just pass it along to the commission. Thank you.
Well, that way when we put a plan together, we know what's more sensitive than other areas, right?
True, but I think one of the commissioners brings up a good point. There are many, and now that we have a full-time city engineer on board who can help us a bit more than, the two part-times we've had, there are many ways to slow traffic that don't involve, speed bumps at all, or humps or bumps. So, depending on the specific situation, there may be other alternatives to reduce speeds if it seems warranted. And then the other thing I would speak to is, we of course pass all of our, things that would affect response times by the fire department, and we do look to them. They are the experts. We do contract them as our fire prevention and protection service. So if they were adamant that something was a problem, I cannot imagine we would ever move forward with it. So
I'd probably do the same thing, but I had to ask.
yeah. So with that, I will invite our representative from the police department to come up. So I went ahead and put the data up on the. So I think you guys have all met, right? You kind of
Yes,
spoke
I
Yes.
before.
came here, I think, believe your first meeting. I'm Sergeant Calvelo with the Los Gatos Monte Sereno Police Department, serving for 19 years, currently the traffic sergeant. Good evening, commissioners and city manager and city engineer. Thank you for having me. I was invited to collect some data over on Dave's Avenue. Dave's Avenue was a stretch between Winchester Boulevard, right about where Corinne is, and then stretching all the way to the hairpin turn where it turns into the 15-mile-an-hour cautionary area. That is by Equestrian, and we placed 2 radar trailers out in each compass direction, one east and one west. Remember, radar is a cone that emits out. It collects data of objects traveling toward it, and in this case, we wanted to capture vehicles. We were able to position the radar trailers so to only capture the vehicles that the radar was facing, so only eastbound traffic or westbound traffic for the according device. Those are the 2 positions, Dorado Lane and Equestrian Lane, where the 2 radar devices were placed, and the first radar at Dorado Lane documented just over 10,000 objects, which were mostly vehicles, at the average speed of 22 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. And then radar 2, which is at Equestrian Raid, just as near the hairpin turn, 8,000 vehicles at an average speed of 27 miles per hour. So in both areas of Dave's Avenue, it's a 25-mile-an-hour zone. I find after reading the data and in my personal experience that the data is correct and that the speeds are acceptable for Dave's Avenue. We have a church, we have a school, we have residential areas. That would be the concern. The roadway toward Dave's Avenue School is a little bit more improvised or approved. It's got a curb and gutter versus, say, toward Via Caballero, where it's got no, it's just shoulder, asphalt shoulder, no raised curb and gutter, et cetera. But you do have some bike lanes closer to the school, et cetera. So you can tell that where most of the cars were, the 10,000 cars, as you come off of Winchester between the Dave's Avenue School, it's a little bit more developed to help with the mobile of children and parents as they walk to school and to the church, hopefully using scooters and bicycles and such. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have with regards to the data. It does play a key role in the totality of it. Listening to the fire department and certainly to your thoughts here, I don't know what the drive is for the speed humps or speed tables, but I might ask you a question. How much speed do you think that a speed table or speed hump reduces it by? It's 3 miles an hour.
At average?
That's the speed.
What about
change,
the range?
The change.
What about the range, though? The average, statistically, the average is the average, but if I got one guy running 80 miles an hour and I slow him
sure.
down to 50 and all I'm looking at is the average, that's not really representative of the increase
Correct.
in safety.
Well, if you're hitting
My
a speed
mind.
bump at 80 miles an hour, you're
No.
gonna know
I'm
you're
saying
gonna hit it.
if no, I mean, averages can be deceiving
Sure.
because you're
So-
really wanting the extremes, right?
Keeping it general, the speed decrease that we see in the town of Los Gatos is 3 miles an hour difference from before we put the speed bump in to after when we put the speed bump in. But that time is the critical portion of it. So when the fire department speaks about taking an 80,000-pound apparatus and the time that it takes to slow that 80,000 pounds with water in it, get to the start of the table, and then go over the table, it does take quite a bit of time. Nonetheless, you're also going to get those 10,300 cars. They're all going to brake before the speed bump, so there's noise associated with that. They're going to hit the table, so you're going to have the sound of the 2 axles hitting the table, and then you're going to have the acceleration from the table. And if your house is in front of one of those speed humps, you're probably going to be one of those people that are opposed to putting that in front of their home. So, and in Los Gatos, we have a traffic calming program. It requires a petition for the neighbors and on that particular street to sign and state that they want to go forward with it. We have about 3 meetings that brings all of those people together, including the stakeholders of the fire department, the police department, the engineering, et cetera, and determining of is this a good solution for this particular area. I would also suggest that we look at other things, working with the city engineer to make traffic calming, much like you mentioned. We can narrow the roadway with lines, like you folks did at the corner between Via Caballero and Equestrian for the hairpin turn. Narrowing the roadway, adding extra lines, even trees and shrubbery adds to creating a narrow roadway so that we don't have the belief that the road is more wide open and we can speed down it. Typically narrow roads, you go a little bit slower. There's also encouragement, there's education, there's enforcement, all of those that are available to you before we add something permanent such as a speed table or speed hump.
How representative is of the speed? The problem with that study is I saw your trailers out there. You see the trailer, you slow down naturally. It's not there's an effect of the trailer slowing down. So your mean up there is not, in my mind, it might be accurate for Dave's. Dave's is a little less of a concern to me personally, but it's not necessarily representative of the speed without the trailers, which is really what if you stick a police car out there, you're going to slow people down.
Absolutely.
Right? So, hey, there's no problems, everything's slow. Well, you're the cause of it being a lot slower than normal. So what would be if you were to hide behind a bush and put a radar out and not tell anybody, do you think there'd be how much of a difference do you think
Well,
there would be?
I did that. And I know that because that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean,
When I'm in a black and white marked patrol car, people go 10 and 2. They drop their cell phone, and they're great drivers. They use the services. Sure. So the radar trailer, the cone that's emitting that goes out, picks their car up faster than you can react. What I want to do is encourage people to drive slower. So it's an immediate feedback device. Once the radar trailer receives the information and displays it on the display board for you, the driver then has an opportunity to say, oh, wow, I'm doing 30 miles an hour. It was positioned near a 25 mile an hour speed limit. I now have the choice, the conscious decision to reduce my speed. Okay. So it's an awareness. So it's education and encouragement. Before I went out there and put the radar trailers, I needed to determine where was the best place to put them because you had the city has a number of stop signs. So I don't want to put it before or after a real stop sign. And also with the hairpin turn, cars are going to deaccelerate and accelerate around the turn. So I had to be a little careful where I put the radar trailers. And then I drive a unmarked police car, and I'm not in uniform, and I go out with my LiDAR device, and I measure a number of cars. And by doing so, I can capture sort of a real time of what's real effect of the speed. And then when I put the trailers there, I actually parked on Equestrian, perpendicular to the roadway. It was fairly dark. Got to speak to some of the residents and then watch the vehicles travel by the radar, see what kind of reaction they had to it, and then also confirm the speed with my LiDAR. So those are some of the things that I've done just to make sure that, now it is radar, so it's not perfect. The cone isn't perfect. That's why I say objects instead of vehicles, because sometimes we pick up birds, sometimes we get dogs, horses, whatever's going by the radar. You can get a bicyclist. So that's why I say objects all the time instead of vehicles.
So I guess the bottom line is, given your professional experience, which obviously is solid, do you feel those are representative of the speed limit without any effect from you standing there with a shotgun and a uniform or whatever? Do you think that's representative of
I think it's representative of the vehicle speed, not the speed limit. Speed limit is 25
right,
miles an hour.
right, exactly.
Right.
So it's reasonable. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And you can articulate, if I write a ticket for 26 miles an hour and a 25 and you take it to court, all you need to do is convince the judge that it was reasonable for you to go beyond 25 miles an hour. You can still articulate based on weather, road conditions, with the roadway condition of your car, all those articulable facts that 25 is too slow, and they could give it to you. So it's a black and white regulatory sign that's governed by the MUTC. So I think a lot of your questions with regards to roadway widths, arterial, collector, and neighborhood streets are going to be in the MUTC for you. So that municipal uniform traffic code will define the types of streets that you have in your city.
Do you think the speed changes as a function of the time? It's my expert opinion that when you are 10 minutes late to school, that the speed of the cars, especially when they're expensive cars, speed up quite a bit, at least from what I see in front of my house.
Sure.
People are running late. They're on their cell phones. I've watched it for 21 years. Is that something that you think is reasonable? Because that's what I see. Normal time, people are usually pretty reasonable when they're running late, or they got to get to work, or they got to drop the kids off, and you got bicycles, and they got a very expensive, high-powered car.
I think any vehicle is capable. It doesn't need to be expensive or high powered.
Well, they tend to go faster, easier when they're.
And being late is a natural reaction to want to speed. I think as we build cars that are better, quieter, faster, we don't realize the speed that they're traveling. A lot of the vehicles that I do speed enforcement on are actually electric vehicles because there's no noise of the motor, of the exhaust. The cars are built really quiet, and so they're listening to their music or on the phone or what have you, and they don't get the sense of actually moving so quickly. You can take 1 mile per hour and you multiply it at times 1.466 feet, and that's the number of feet per second that you're traveling. So at about 35 miles an hour, you're maybe about 46 feet per second. And I like people to realize that because when you look at the average house property width, it's about 60 to 100 feet. It takes you a second and a half for you to realize that there's danger up ahead, and then another second for you to take your foot off the accelerator onto the brake. And that's if your car is in perfect condition with perfect roadway and perfect tires. And all that time, you're still traveling. So you take that 1.46 feet per second and you times it by the number of miles per hour, and you could have a recipe for disaster. So that's where those collisions occur. As the speed increases, the chances for a collision can occur, or the greater the property damage can occur.
So with your gut, there's no issue?
Say again?
You don't think there's an issue with speed? I mean, just your
On
gut?
James Avenue?
Just in general, your gut.
Overall, no.
No.
I think
there's not.
occasionally, yes. I think that there could, that people, the police or anybody can't be there at all times.
Of course not.
I think that you could get speeds of 40 or 45 occasionally. The collision rate is really low. The last collision that we had was at Dave's near Via Caballero, and that was because the person was under the influence. So there's no mitigating factors related to the street or the engineering. There's no mitigating factors whether or not there was speed bumps or tables or even the enforcement. Once you put intoxication into the table, everything else goes out the window. You can't drive drunk. And that was the last documented collision that I'm aware of on Dave's Avenue. And remember, Dave's Avenue is also sheriff's jurisdiction over by Highway 9. So that's Highway Patrol. Yeah. Yes?
Yes.
Hi.
Yeah. So I think that one of the first things you said that in Los Gatos there's a process for neighborhoods or homeowners on the street to get together and discuss traffic calming. Is that something that we have in Monte Sereno?
We don't currently have it on the books, but, that is certainly a definite possibility. And now that we have someone on board that could help a bit more with that, it's,
Because it seems like we've had success in the past with grassroots efforts, but if, because I think that Dave's is a major thoroughfare, but there are other streets that it sound, based on the conversations that we've heard, might not be primary routes for addressing some certain things with, but might be, how to build the activism within the neighborhood and have a process for neighbors to actually take some issues forward.
I think it's really important. It all starts at grassroots.
Yeah.
Los Gatos still isn't a very big town. And I don't, the more I work for government, the more I understand where the people are coming from. And I'm a resident of San Jose and a voting citizen too. And so it's good to know all the stakeholders in any particular decision that are going to affect the greater good, right? So whether that's the garbage company, because they're going up and down the road, the water company, you also have a large area of horses. So how does it affect them? For Safe Routes to School, for Dave's Avenue School, how will those speed tables affect children on bicycles or scooters that want to take that type of mobile way to school? And so, you put all these people together in a big think tank and talk about discussions. A lot of it is education, too. When you learn about the fire department and the difficulties or the challenges that they can have with regards to navigating those tables, and same with the police cars or the garbage trucks, and the children on their bikes. A lot more comes in the light, and maybe there's some other situations or other ideas that can help reduce speed, thereby keeping everybody more safe than jumping right to a table or right to a stop sign or right to a signal light, something like that.
I've been inspired by listening to both the police department and the fire department, and that's so educational for, safe routes to school. Is there an opportunity at the school level to hear about what the experience is like of our civic, government officials who have to navigate the streets so that we can educate parents who are traversing the streets, or at least the kids.
And it's part of it.
What a mathematical lesson.
Monte Sereno subscribes to the Keep Kids Alive Drive 25, and Doug started that organization, nonprofit organization in Nebraska when his child was killed due to a vehicle collision. A super sad story, but now he's taking all that positive energy and turning it into Keep Kids Alive Drive 25. And that was certainly accepted by your council, and then now the Better Streets Commission, and a lot of the neighborhoods have these decals on their garbage cans, which is, again, that awareness, right? So when once a week you're getting that reminder to say, hey, I need to slow down. I'm traveling at 36 feet per second, so 25 miles an hour. So I need to slow down. It's nothing's more important than either your life or the lives of others, and you can't take it back.
Can I ask a question about that as well, the 25 miles per hour? Because I read about in Sunnyvale, they just transitioned the street speed to 15 miles an hour around one of their schools. And I was just wondering kind of if you've heard of it, what the rationale for transitioning from 25 to 15 would be, what the process would be for streets that feel like they have, maybe it's not Dave's, maybe it's Poppy, maybe 25 is way too fast for some of
Poppy, I think, is officially 20, even though I have a 25 on my.
Maybe it should be 15. I
container.
tested it
I
out
don't
on
know.
my street. I drove 25 and yelled out my speed to my neighbors as they stood by, and 25 felt very fast for all of us with our children out there.
Yeah, Sunnyvale is a progressive city, and you have that perception. So I receive all the phone calls with regards to speed or speed complaints, et cetera, and I find that a lot of times it starts with perception, right? So if I'm pushing the stroller and I've got my 2-year-old in the stroller, I'm going to be a little bit more heightened. The sounds of vehicles, the sounds that the tires make, the number of trees or the shrubbery, all that amplifies sound. And so each officer generally goes through the training for estimated speed. So we should be able to visually estimate speed within 5 miles an hour just by looking at it. We're pretty good at it. And so when we are with our loved ones, we tend to be a little more heightened, and so the perception of that tends to go up. And so a car that's actually traveling 25 miles an hour, we believe is going 50. And I get that all the time. Everybody's going 50 in my neighborhood. And then we go out and we see 22 miles an hour. And it's not that it's wrong. It's just perception. And there's still something that we can do, right? So I never shortchange those kind of calls. Sunnyvale being progressive, I don't know how they're going to get their speeds down to 15 miles an hour. It's one of the latest trends. And the other trend is to actually close streets that are near schools. They're doing that a lot in Europe. But that's where having the city engineer now on board can be a real benefit to that, because the engineer is going to work with the survey companies to determine if 15 miles an hour is doable for that sort of period of time. And they're going to look at volume, condition of the roadway, the number of children that travel the street. In fact, putting a crossing guard out on a street is usually determined by need created by volume, the number of students. If your street only has 12 students crossing, then you're not necessarily going to need a crossing guard, no matter how loud the neighborhood is about getting one out there. It just doesn't fit the MUTC or the vehicle code. It doesn't. I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm interested to follow through and kind of see how they're going to do it. I know a number of the guys and gals over at Sunnyvale. I think it's a huge undertaking, and I hope they actually get it. Because then once they get it, then I can plagiarize and bring it over here if it's beneficial to our community, such as the 2-lane roadways right in front of the schools. 15 miles an hour at 1.466 versus 25 at 1.466 just gives you a little bit more time to watch out for that darting kid. Yeah.
Have you seen any of the other schools in Wisconsin, especially the elementary schools, that have done stuff that you thought was really effective that could be applied to Dave's, just in general from your perspective?
Well, I work with each of them as safe routes. I'm the
that's what I'm
liaison.
asking, yeah.
And I know the folks at Dave's Avenue. We really go the education and encouragement route. We went from a couple bicycle rodeos a year to now 5. We have 1 at each of the schools. And now we've incorporated the Fisher children as train-the-trainers. So we get the 6th and 7th graders to make videos on helmet safety. Currently, the last one they did was reflective gear, reflective wear, and wearing lights at night. So we use the children to pass along that information because we tend to think that they can force the adult to follow within the same. And we've now done such a good job that it's actually part of the curriculum of the school district is bicycle safety, bicycle rodeo, and then what comes along with safe routes. And Dave's Avenue School is part of the safe route system. So I think that it does make a difference with getting them out there to the school districts and getting the teachers involved and getting the parents involved. Without the parent volunteers, we couldn't do all the work that we do. Anything else?
I just like to put a good word into some member that it's a pretty, school kids change every 5 years, and I respect the school. My kids have been there, but it's a pretty strong neighborhood. I think if you are looking for input, I don't live on Bruce, but I know a lot of people on Bruce, and there's potholes and other stuff which we're going to look at. But I think in general I think what you were alluding to, I think you'd have a lot of residents that would be pretty interested in discussing it in conjunction with the school, obviously. But I think it's more the small. I think the more concerns more in the smaller streets that feed into Dave's versus Dave's. It's the people that shoot up Bruce and go down Poppy, that they go up Vista and they shoot down, and that's probably, you get a bigger sense of speed there, and maybe we're all being paranoid. I don't think so.
I don't think so. I'm there quite often. Bruce
But-
and Poppy is my corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
To
Rylan
me,
Reynolds lives at the corner there, him and his father, and he's my community policing contact for that neighborhood. So he lives right at the corner there at the stop sign, and if there's an issue, he emails me or calls me on the phone and says, hey Kalipo, the speeds are ticking up a little bit. And I try to be fair because there's a slight rise as it turns to Bruce into Vista, and then as they come down the hill, but I can shoot out 1,100 feet and I'll get the speed. But for the most part, people are doing pretty good. The speed's 20 miles an hour. So people need to be reminded that they need to travel a little slower, and they need to stop at the stop sign. So I was just out there last week, Monday or so.
And I think so I know before these meetings, I try to communicate with friends or people who I know who happen to live on Bruce. I have friends whose children live on Bruce, and encourage them to attend these meetings, because we also, that's part of the process, is them vocalizing in a public forum issues. So, I think it's a reminder that we can talk about having kind of enforcement, but we also need to encourage our neighbors and our community members to come and make public statements about these things if it is a big concern. Sorry, I just think that the common good, we all need to kind of own the issue.
Absolutely.
Do you have any data on Vineland by any chance? Are you off the top of your head?
Probably not recently, and I don't recall doing it, mostly because Vineland has a long hill at Posa Phobos, past Ravanan, and then Vineland Court, there's a stop sign there, so that's kind of they're forced to stop at that location. The undulation would be a little bit difficult because the radar just typically shoots out straight.
Mm-hmm.
We can certainly get some data by doing handheld stuff, so that undercover work that I was telling you about, hiding behind the trees, we can certainly do that.
That would be great, because when I was out canvassing, there were several families, especially on Vineland close to Winchester, with little kids that are extremely worried about how fast, because people are coming up to Winchester, so they're zooming up, and the houses are right on the street, so there's not a lot of setback.
So they're traveling toward Winchester?
They're traveling toward Winchester.
Yeah, Burton Craig has been working on that area too for a little bit. In fact, I gave him a radar gun to use for a while to get some data, and then after that, the narrowness of the lanes there, he put in those rubber bumps and narrowed it a little bit. I don't know how effective that is. I didn't follow the data afterwards, and you're right. That area does narrow down there a little bit. My guess is that probably most of the traffic is going to be from the neighbors, right? So that's the evil of it, right? So we want enforcement on the stop sign, and then you find out everybody's coming off of Via Palomino. So as they're coming in, they're going to work. But there's going to be that cut-through traffic too, because the two stop signs on Dave's Avenue creates a cut-through down Vineland, and they take Pasarola, so they take Haven over. And so that's why we have to be sensitive to the side streets too for speed. We put the trailer out on
Palos Verdes?
both of those streets,
Yeah.
traveling north or southbound, so that we can capture them when we cut through the Daves. But at any time you want something like that, we'll work with you on it.
Thank you.
There are a lot of contractors in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Trust me, the neighbors, including myself, aren't perfect, but the
They
contractors and the
just-
gardeners.
I've actually
and the,
called the police department on a
Yeah,
couple of those
there's a lot of
guys
trucks doing works on
on
houses.
Carl, yeah.
And I'm more than happy to take those
Yeah.
calls and handle them, especially if you have the more detailed, the better. We do invite a lot of services into our neighborhoods now, whether it's landscape, pool, Amazon, all the home delivery. So we do get a lot more strange vehicles into our neighborhood. My spiel to them is always that because they're in an area that they're unfamiliar, they should actually be driving slower.
They should be.
Should be, yes. I'm here to help. And then certainly you folks can email me or give me a call or give the dispatch a call and just say, hey, I'd just like to have some speed enforcement on Vineland or whatever your particular area is, and let us know. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you guys. We really appreciate it, and I hope that was informative.
Very instructive. Thank you.
And gave you some good information to chew on. All right. All right, with that, we will move on to the only other item tonight, which is the introduction of our newest addition to City Hall. Our new city engineer, Jessica Kahn, has joined me tonight. I think you were able to say hello to everybody as they came in, I think, more or less. I am super excited to have her join our team. She comes to us most recently from Scotts Valley, where she was basically overseeing the engineering function there as well. She has a lot of great experience with pavement management programs, other city public works projects related to streets. She has a keen interest in how the city interfaces with all the other providers that we have, because we are a city of minimal services that the city provides directly. So we have to rely on the sanitation district and the solid waste for recycling and green waste and garbage and VTA and all the other agencies that we have to work with. And she has she expressed a real keen interest in being very active in representing our interest with all of the places that provide services to us and that affect us. And, it's just awesome that she's going to be here full time, and she'll be replacing the 2 part-time engineers that we have. And so I think it will just overall, serve our community, our commission, our city council better having, a dedicated full-time permanent employee, especially all that's going on with the streets and stuff. And her and I haven't had a chance to talk yet because she's basically just getting the download from the current engineers, but we'll eventually be chatting some more, and because I want to talk to her about some things that I've mentioned to all of you, including, bumping up our efforts related to the Bike and Ped Master Plan and some of the things in there. More stuff on the Safe Routes to School, the Phase 1 study. There's some other things that need to be implemented on that. And just a number of things that, given the limitations of having 2 separate people working part-time each, that, we really had with that. I think that we'll, be able to get to those things more readily so that it doesn't. And then also having a dedicated staff liaison to the Better Streets Commission as well, beyond myself. So with that, I just wanted to introduce her, and I don't know if she wants to say anything.
Just happy to be here.
So she'll, I think what I'll have her do is email all of you so that you'll have her email address and that you'll have her contact. And so moving forward, if you have any questions or concern or need information related to the city's public works and city engineering, she is your person. So I'm thrilled to have her here. Any questions about that?
Can I ask a question on something we did before? It's easy. Is that allowed?
Yeah.
I've walked up Andrews twice in the last week where we talked about it, and they put the new. I know we talked about it, and I think it's great. They put the new.
I did mean to give you some more update on that, but go ahead.
Yeah. And my question was, I walked up and it's great. I technically was walking on the right-hand side of the road, right, going up. If I walked on the left, there was nothing there was nothing to walk on. Do you want people to walk up on the right on that wide curb? Is that
Yes.
kosher, for lack of a better word? And should we let people know that somehow? I was just wondering when I was walking
Well,
up. It was great. But
the lanes were shifted such that unless you walk in the street, you
Right.
can't really walk up the left side on
I know
part
that,
of
but
it.
that's technically against the rules. I mean,
Well-
I did it anyway, but
The rules and regulate, I'm not sure if it's actually law, but in general, you're supposed to be facing traffic, correct? But that's when you're walking in the lane, not when you're walking on the side of the road.
okay.
So the reason why we did the improvement there was to create an actual pedestrian area. And I'm sorry, that was one thing I meant to give you an update on. So there's still two more pieces that will be put into place with the work there. One is the signs for Share the Road, which the Los Gatos Public Works has those as part of their corp yard, so they will be able to put those up. And then we were also talked about the Sharrows, which are the embedded thermoplastic pieces that have the arrows and then the bicycle symbol. They don't have the ability to do those themselves, but I talked to the Public Works Director, and he said they're going to be doing some other contracts where they would have a contractor who could do it, and they will put those in. So I'm hoping that the signs are, say, in the next couple months, and that the Sharrows would be sometime thereafter. So hopefully with those two pieces, moving the lanes over, creating a clear pedestrian area, it should be a lot safer.
But do you need to somehow, maybe it's just me being too analytical, but do you need to encourage people to walk on that wide space? I mean, versus superficially following the rules and going over on the other side of the road where it's dangerous? I just don't know. Is it like a walk over here? Might be a dumb idea, but I was wondering, it was crossed my mind. I did it twice in the last week and a half.
Well, we definitely, this all came to us, of course, because of a couple of neighbors in the area. And I know, as far as I know, they have broadcasted,
Right.
this new improvement, to the neighbors in the area. And it really is mostly about our neighbors. And again, I cannot thank the town of Los Gatos enough because, they're the ones that did all this work.
It's a great change.
And we even offered to pay for part of it, and they didn't ask us for any money, so it was pretty awesome on their part. So we're very happy about it.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding the Sharrows, so is that much more complicated than paint, or is all paint on a roadway need to be this thermoplastic?
Well,
or
in
what?
general, most cities don't necessarily use paint on pavement today. It's called, the thermoplastic it requires a process to put it down. And some larger cities have all the machinery and all the things that you need to do it, but the town does not. And the reason why we recommend using thermoplastic is because it lasts a lot longer. We did only paint the new left turn pocket that's on Dave's in front of the school. That is actually only paint at the moment, but we did that mostly because we're running basically a pilot project to make sure that this works. But if it does work out, we will most likely include, as part of this coming summer's pavement management program, we'll include in the contract to get them to put thermoplastic down. So it'll be much more permanent. But we really wanted to run a test to make sure it was running well. It was doing excuse me, what it was supposed to do. That was my update. I meant to
Thank you.
pass along. Okay. So I guess that was kind of the city manager's report.
All right, great. Well, welcome aboard.
So the only other thing I would have to say is tonight we have to say so long to two of our commissioners. One, the chairman, Beth, because as of, you said January 1st, right?
Yep.
He's leaving us for the big lights in the big city. He's moving to San Jose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, big move, right?
Real traffic.
Yeah.
So, he was one of the one-year term commissioners, so his term would have been up, and he certainly could have reapplied, but because he's no longer going to be an actual resident, he does not qualify. So, and of course, the other commissioner, Liz Lawler, has been elected to city council, and she also was you were the 1 year as well, right? Yeah. So it's kind of odd, but that's how it worked out. So, of course, she will not be on our Better Streets Commission, but will, starting next Tuesday, be seated on our city council, which is just awesome.
Precluded from doing both?
Yes, because this is a citizens advisory group, and
you're
she's
not
actually a
citizen,
council
right?
person. Well, she's still a citizen.
Madam Council Member.
So I just want to personally thank both of you for your, while it was limited, I do really appreciate your service. Anytime citizens step up to the plate to volunteer, to be on commissions and committees and boards, in this case, it wasn't a huge commitment, but it is still a commitment, and I just wanted to thank you both for that. And I also, given that, I'm also encouraging everyone listening online, those in the audience, as well as all the existing commissioners, please talk to folks, get them to apply to be a Better Streets Commissioner. So we really rely more on our commissioners, council people, and our residents who come to meetings and are regularly involved to get the word out. So I really encourage you. The application is online. I can't remember the due date, but we did extend it a little bit. But I believe, actually, I think it's on the wall over there. We are accepting applications, and then they will be likely considered by the City Council January 22nd. I think that's all I had. Any questions?
Well, I guess it could be a question, but it's also something I came across of sharing. I saw that Los Gatos posted a request for town gateway artists, and I know that seems slightly unrelated, but they're most likely going to be located in your streets. And so I just thought that was a wonderful thing, and I don't know if we have any relationship with the town council or to share that information with our townspeople to contribute, because we share the same streets to pass into the town, the
So
city and town.
were they looking for volunteers to work on some form of committee?
So I believe they have a committee, but they're looking for artists
Okay.
to put forward potential art to design and fabricate. It says permanent site-specific original artwork that will function as a prominent gateway marker for people entering and exiting the town.
That is traffic calming.
Most of the entering and exiting Monte Sereno also involves
It
Los
does.
Gatos. So I just thought that, and we have many artists in our community, so at least I see many open art studios in our community. So I thought that
And
was just a.
I mean, were they looking for artists only from Los Gatos, or did it?
It doesn't say that.
Okay, so maybe
That's
they're
why.
open for others, yeah.
That was something Jim Helmer brought up last year, was a gateway at base of Winchester, right? To slow
Yes.
people down in Winchester, so.
And I talked to Matt Morley in Los Gatos before this commission, because I was really interested in that. So I was really excited that they're moving forward with that, but I also wanted to make sure that we share so many boundaries
True.
that if it's open to any artist, that we make sure that we can
Yeah,
get the
I
word
can
out to
certainly,
our artists.
I can certainly check.
I mean, I was serious. That is a traffic calming, because they had a thing here about 10 years ago where they had some of the city planner in, and they mentioned that gateways and art actually slow cars down. So,
Have you driven Junipero Serra recently around Stanford, between Page Mill and Stanford?
Oh, I went there a couple times last week.
They've created these islands that are planted in the middle that also slows traffic down. It
Yeah.
forces people to. It's new. It wasn't there.
but
about a
the
month
fire
ago.
department probably likes them too.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I can't imagine you guys would like that, but it worked. It slowed everybody down. But that's
I'll certainly ask.
Okay.
That's awesome, I'm sure. I'm sure there's, well, I shouldn't say it, I'm sure, but I would imagine there's not a restriction.
I haven't seen one, and they said they had extended the deadline to December 28th.
Okay. Are you going to put in your name?
No. I am not an artist.
All right, with that, I have nothing else.
Great, then we will adjourn this